Susan B. Anthony was born February 15, 1820 in Adams, Massachusetts. Her bringing up wasn't a common one. Her family was one with activist traditions, so she had a much more liberal way of thinking. Susan wasn't one for love stories and happily ever afters. She was a fighter, aggressive and compassionate by nature. She had a keen mind and a certain air of charisma, with an incredible ability to inspire other people and to rally them to her side. Susan B. Anthony is a hero because she was able to get women's rights one step closer towards equality. She played an important role in the American Anti-Slavery Society, and she was able to accomplish the allowance of mixed-gender education. Susan B. Anthony was able to get women's rights one step closer towards equality. While Susan accomplished many difficult feats during her life, she didn't do it alone. With the help of Elizabeth Cady Stanton, they were able to get voting rights for women and would eventually lead the National American Women's Suffrage Association. Miss Stanton, would you have considered Miss Anthony a friend?
Oh, yes. We were very dear to each other. While we disagreed on many issues, we made a great team. I had never done something as interesting or as challenging as working with Susan, and God bless her soul. She was never afraid to voice her opinion, even if they were wholly inappropriate. I was the mediator and the filter between what was in her mind and what came out of her mouth. It was a full-time job.
How did the idea to start these rallies, or shall we say movements, in favor of women commence?
Well, we're all women, aren't we? We felt the injustices as much as everybody else. The only difference would be that we were the only ones that weren't afraid to speak up. But let me start from the beginning. Susan and I were quite young when we met, perhaps in our old 20s. It was a wonderful mishap. We were both strolling through the town of Seneca Falls when we bumped into each other on a street corner. I remember that she made me spill the coffee I was taking for my dear husband. I remember disliking the woman instantly. You see, my husband is a man that follows his schedule rigorously, so I could not be late. I glared at the lady, and she just laughed in my face. She had such a ridiculous laugh that I started laughing alongside her. My husband didn't get his coffee that day, and he was grumpy for the rest of it. After that, Susan and I made a point of meeting at that same street corner almost every day. After almost a year, when we were already practically sisters, Susan mentioned the unfairness towards women. I was a very docile woman, but Susan was a total rebel. She changed me, and I am forever grateful for that. We planned everything, the movements, the protests, every battle we would have to face to be equal with men.
Thank you, Miss Stanton. That was a very beautiful story. How are you now?
Very well, thank you. Thanks to Susan, I will always be able to look back in my life and feel thoroughly accomplished with myself. I would have never imagined this kind of life for myself. I just wanted a family, a nice husband, and a happily ever after. I got it all. I got to be a hero for my sisters and my beautiful happy ending. I still cannot believe all I accomplished in my life. We were able to form several movements, the Women's National Loyal League and the National American Women's Suffrage Association, and I am able to say that even a few more. We succeeded. I cannot be happier with how my life turned out.
Thank you, Miss Stanton, for answering our questions.
Oh no, thank you. This was wonderful.
Miss Anthony and Stanton have been through so much together. Thanks to them, women started to open their eyes to the unfairness of their status in society. Their stories are shared around the world and held in great importance. It inspired the continuance of these acts towards women's rights, which led to where we are now. The 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, also known as the Susan B. Anthony Amendment, grants the right to vote to all American women over 21, just a hair's breadth away of complete equality. Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton are forever remembered as heroes because they were able to acquire a certain sense of equality between men and women, something we were horribly lacking. However, with all of her efforts, Susan B. Anthony still wasn't satisfied with the world she lived in. She continued to fight injustices in the United States of America. Susan B. Anthony played an important role in the American Anti-Slavery Society. Susan's family was not a traditional one. They were activists. They had a liberal way of thinking that supported Susan in everything she did. Her brothers, Daniel and Merritt Anthony, formed a part of Susan's anti-slavery movement. How did this alliance, shall we say, come to be with Miss Anthony? Didn't you have siblings quarrels, or were you just best friends? Because it can happen, siblings being friends, I mean, as impossible as it may seem.
The thing is, we were a big family. Susan and I were a part of the eldest siblings. Merritt was the youngest alongside Mary. Susan and I were partners in crime. While we did fight, we still remained best friends. Then Merritt came along. He was a troublemaker among the young ones and immediately became a favorite of ours. But then, Susan started to become angry. All her male teachers refused to teach her the same things as boys, and she became resentful. We would witness how masters punished their slaves, and it broke her heart. Thank the Lord, our father seemed to understand what was frustrating her, and allowed us to vent, to be angry at society. He even helped. Thanks to him, Susan became our little rebel. Our father was a cunning, intelligent, and charismatic man. Like father, like daughter. Susan was the ringleader. Merritt and I, we were just pawns in her games, willing pawns. But still. Then, we grew older and her mind grew along with her. Susan's pride and sense of righteousness was huge. She was all for protecting the weak and the minorities.
So, why was she considered so important during this movement?
Well, she was the mind of this whole operation, and we were her voices outside of Massachusetts. She had sent us to Kansas to spread the word, to cause mayhem, uproar in the unfairness of having slaves. We had an open correspondence going on. She would write commands and things she wanted us to do. She was very scary when she got angry. She was the one who started this thing. We didn't really get slavery abolished, but people were finally starting to realize how idiotic slavery was.
Even though it was hard to change someone's way of thinking in such a closed society, Susan did it. Every time she talked about something, people would be rapt with attention. She had a passion that could not be hidden in her speeches. When she discussed these matters, people would realize the injustices we had in this world. She would inspire people to share their thoughts, their desires, their dreams. Many people dreamed of a better world, but were too afraid to act on it. Susan decided to be the one to do it for them. The Anthony family will forever be remembered as important figures in history because they were heroes in their time. They were the only ones who would speak up against the injustices and defend the minorities. While Susan had already accomplished the impossible for a woman of her time, she would not give up. She wanted it all for her sisters. Voting rights, abolishment of injustices, and prime education for all. Susan B. Anthony was able to accomplish the allowance of mixed-gender education. Clara Memphis was a part of the Teachers' Convention in Troy, New York. She was one of the main figureheads of women teachers. She was considered one of the most conservative teachers, meaning that she was aghast at the possibility of having mixed-gender educations. However, her viewpoint of this matter was fiercely changed by Susan B. Anthony. So, Miss Memphis, how did you come to know our dear friend Susan?
It's actually quite a funny story. You see, we were in a teachers' convention, arguing about the daily matters of teaching, supplies, staff members, etc. It was a pretty standard one, until the doors just flew open, and I'm not kidding, it was all very dramatic. And Susan just comes in and starts speaking. Everyone was aghast at her behavior, and more so by the fact no one even knew who she was. I was furious. I was in the middle of making a very important point of our school lunch is healthier, and she just comes in and interrupts me. How dare she? No one interrupted me. No one. So, as you can see, I was pretty angry. She just smiled very confidently, might add, and started speaking. At first, I was overcome by this anger. I was completely against having mixed gender education. I was raised in a very traditional and religious household, and she had a very bold way of speaking. Her voice would carry throughout the whole room, and there was no way of just ignoring her. When she spoke, every single pair of eyes turned to her. She argued very reasonable points, and the fact I started to believe some of them during her speech showed me how wrong I was and how right she was. After she finished speaking, she bowed, turned, and left. Everyone stared open-mouthed at the doors. I cleared my throat and continued our meeting. But when it was over, I found all I could about her and went inside to her.
Wow. I would guess that turned out to be a very complicated relationship.
Yes, you guessed correctly. From the start, we could be considered enemies, since we had such different ideas, but she completely won me over. We turned out to be partners, and I helped her make her speeches so she could start more other conversations just like she did mine. I noticed that she had a very crude way of speaking. We became dear friends and helped each other out. I helped her convince people over my area of coverage. We had divided some states and claimed part of responsible for them to share our ideas. While she spoke to people in her area, we accomplished great things, she and I.
The fact that she was fearless is what helped her get what she wanted. She had no shame in sharing her ideas to other people, and she gained the favor of lots of schools who definitely agree with her. Susan B. Anthony was a very convincing woman. She got people to share her ideas simply by speaking. Susan B. Anthony was a warrior because she fought in the name of women, slaves, and children. She was a fearless woman. The rest of us should make an example of her and be just as fearless in life. Don't be a bystander. Take action against injustices. Don't be afraid to fail. The real failure is when you stop trying.
The older I get, the greater power I seem to have to help the world. I am like a snowball. The further I am rolled, the more I gain.